The computer is a dumb rock. If we tell it to do something wrong, it's going to happily continue to do that thing wrong over and over and over again. Prompting is just a more human interface to the computer doing what you tell it to do. And a lot of the cases when I have errors in prompting, it's because I'm being ambiguous, and it's the ambiguity of the language that I'm using, which computer programming doesn't necessarily have that issue because it's so pedantic and so detail-oriented.
From Modern Logic, I'm Andy Rahn with Dustin Bruzenak, and this is AI for your business.
If you need help with AI, bringing it into your business, either at the management team level or at the workflow level, we're here to help. You can find our website on modernlogic.io. There's a contact form there, or you can reach us at email on info@modernlogic.io. We're happy to help and have a conversation about how AI can enable the next generation of workflow improvements for your business.
Today's episode, first of a new year. Happy New Year to you. We're going to discuss the new model that dropped from OpenAI, as well as have a lengthy and I hope interesting conversation about skepticism on your team or just in general about AI. It was really a fun conversation. I hope you enjoy it.
Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to the show. We're glad to have you, and hopefully you took some time off for the holidays and you're back fresh and ready to tackle 2026, which I think if it's anything like 2025, we're going to be doing a lot of talking about AI during this year. Not just us, but business owners in general. So we're going to be with you to help educate you, answer your questions, give you some news updates, and go from there. Now, we're talking to you from the past, so you're living in the future because we're recording this right before our break so that we can get it in the can. Let's just get started with the news that ChatGPT dropped 5.2 for us just last week, and for you a few weeks ago. And what this is an update to the Prime ChatGPT model, but it's an update to all three of their main models: the thinking model, the summary model, and then the reasoning model. So they made some really significant changes. If you paid attention to the things we were talking about previously, we were talking about how Sam Altman had this memo, this internal memo that leaked about this red alert moment where Gemini 3 really triggered him to wake up. And people online were speculating that would accelerate the internal development of ChatGPT. And lo and behold, like a week after that memo got leaked, we see a new version of ChatGPT, and it's pretty dang good, right? So
now,
I don't know.
Sam Altman surely knew that 5.2 was coming along. So if this is the solution to his fears, I'm skeptical.
Maybe maybe that was just good marketing on his part. I
bet at least 50% marketing. Yeah.
But I think they may have accelerated it a little bit because I think they were planning on a bigger drop maybe. But what it's really gotten good at is something that none of us use it for, which is the agentic component of it. So the early testing and the benchmarks that they're showing are that this thing is more than twice as good as 5.1 at long-running multi-step tasks. So you can see in the sort of reading the tea leaves for 2026, this is going exactly where we were predicting it was going. It's moving away from the chat experience, which a lot of us interact with. It's literally in the name, ChatGPT, and it's since 5.0, it's gotten slightly worse at the chat experience, and they're working on making it better at both the reasoning and the multi-step agentic experience, because that's where the economic value starts to get seen by the majority of people. So I thought that was an interesting little point.
One little bit of skepticism there. It's getting better. But is it now consuming a shit ton more, pardon language, a whole lot more tokens? Because
so I don't think so, but I haven't actually tested it that thoroughly to see how many tokens it's eating. I certainly don't think this was intended for coders. Although this is good at coding, it's primarily intended for the business use cases that prior to 5.2 it was failing at pretty miserably. 5.1 was okay, but the larger the context, the more it would get out. Now they've expanded the context window again, And so 5.2 is apparently much more accurate at those multi-step tests. 5.1 was an improvement on 5.0. And so we're going to continue to see, I think. Still don't give it your credit card. That's still my advice. But I think it's starting to get to the point where we can use it for things like go do some research and build a PowerPoint, or go do some research and do, some more of these multi-step knowledge-based tasks that formerly it was failing at. And the early preliminary reports I've seen are that it is significantly better. It's still not where you want it to be to completely replace you being in the loop or anything. And
I got to remember, ChatGPT is just one interface onto this model. That model is going to be used in a lot of other contexts, and especially in applications purpose-built for your business that have, sorry to use the word context twice, but have in the model context, the stuff we've been talking about. Using this more powerful model is going to give better results than just going straight to chatgpt.com.
Exactly. And they've really, in 5.1 and 5.2, apparently, they've really improved the rule following. They're really working hard on having it not go off the rails and do different random things and following your instructions. So the real key to prompting 5.2 turns out to be being much more pedantic and descriptive of the steps that you want it to execute, which is something we've been saying in our prompting advice for a long time. But the more specific you are about how it should go about a task, the more accurate results you get. And that's both because it knows more steps, but also it causes it to think a little harder, work a little harder to become accurate and hallucinate and make things up a little less. And so if you prompt it correctly, the new models are very good at that multi-step instruction piece of the prompt. And so when you're working with 5.2, you want to be providing it. I want you to go to this website. I want you to do this with that data. I want you to output in this format, et cetera, et cetera. And so now you're going to see these, what that gives us as developers and as people who work with AI on behalf of companies, it gives us a whole new set of more accurate tools. Whereas before we might have had to have multi-step reasoning chains or multiple LLMs validating things. And now it's just going to be doing a lot more quickly, better right out of the gate. So now we can focus a little more on the validation and the follow-up and the other stuff, enriching the workflow, rather than spending a lot of time engineering, or as much time engineering, is it giving us the right answer in the first place? Right.
But still, ultimately, it's an incremental improvement. And I think this question about, is it giving me the right answer? I actually have a funny anecdote along those lines. I'm a sci-fi buff, and one of my favorite authors is this guy named John Scalzi. And as an author, he sees generative AI as a threat to his livelihood, as a lot of us are feeling the pressure to, like, what's my job going to be? We've talked about that. I would say he's probably an AI skeptic, but he also sounds to me like he was trying to keep an open mind, and he did a little experiment, which is he went to a bunch of different models, OpenAI's models, Grok, Claude, Gemini, the whole 9 yards, and did a little experiment to see. People keep saying they're getting better at not making stuff up, and they don't lie as much all the time. And so he came up with a pretty simple question, which was, hey, who did I dedicate this particular book that I wrote to? And who is that person to me? He may not even said that he was the author of the book. He may have just said who was dedicated in this book. And all of the models got that wrong. And what's interesting is all but one of them, I forget which one it was, maybe Claude or something, just confidently said something wrong. They said it was dedicated to someone who it wasn't. One AI made up additional children for him and gave him names to these made up children. Some people credited some of the AIs.
You're doing it right.
Yeah, they attributed the book to a different author entirely, and then said it was dedicated to that author's wife, but didn't get that author's spouse's name correct either. So it was just like, all right, we talk about how these things can be super useful and powerful, but the fact is, if you just take it off the shelf and you plug it into your business, you may be introducing a whole lot of that work slop. It's still there. It's still going to do bad things. And that's why, honestly, that's why we're doing this podcast, because we see the potential, the power's there, but you have to use this stuff to get the
Yeah,
value.
and I think so many people use it the first time, get a bad answer, and make the assumption that it's a bad tool. And reading in between the lines on the Scalzi article, I think that was his experience as well. But I think when you dig under the surface of most of these negative experiences, what you find is people who didn't educate themselves on how to use the tool correctly. This is similar to like back when Google first came out. Those of us who are old guys with gray hair or hair at all, no, I'm a little more deficient. We remember when Google came out, and when you could basically Google something, and this would be the equivalent of typing in shopping and have it not pull up Amazon, because Amazon was small back then, and saying, oh, Google couldn't find Amazon, Google is crap, we had to invest in some cases over years developing a skill set on how to Google things. And I think the people who assume that these tools are magical silver bullets, they're the ones most burnt by the LLMs, because they're the ones who are not putting in the effort to realize it is a tool. It is not a mystical genie that solves all your problems. And I tell people this all the time. It requires engineering. It requires iteration. It requires validation. It requires quality control. You need to know what the output is. You need to give it clear prompting and work to understand why it's giving you the bad results that it's giving you and how to ameliorate that. And then you also need to add humans in the loop and so on and other steps to catch the cases where it does go a little off the rails. But I think you can get 95% of the make something up out of the pipeline.
But I saw a kind of a tongue-in-cheek little joke on the socials over the weekend, and it was like, George Clooney is a great actor, right? You put him in an operating theater with a surgical gown and put actors around him, they're handing him scalpels, and he's doing a scene for ER or whatever, like, you're going to believe, wow, that is a surgeon doing their job. I believe it. But you would not want George Clooney to actually do surgery on you. And then the tagline on that post was, this post is about AI.
Interesting.
And so it's, that is interesting that in some ways, the mistakes we see AI making is similar to as if you had someone who is really good at pretending to be the thing that you're asking, but they don't actually have the depth of expertise of someone who is actually that thing.
But neither does the computer-operated robot that they're using to remove your kidney or whatever.
Okay, but that's the difference between like large language model AI versus like more traditional expert systems or other rule-based things. If you need an automated system that has that level of reliability that's necessary, like operating on living humans or piloting aircraft or something, you can't just use an LLM and be like, oh, at the bottom of your prompt say, oh, don't crash. You don't crash the plane.
Don't crash the plane. Make sure plane stays in air.
Yeah, don't kill the
Double
patient.
check that all of the brakes are working on the plane before you land.
No, you would have more traditional rule-based hard lockouts for those things and a dedicated sensor for are the wheels down, triggering something. I wouldn't even dream of how you'd build an actual piloting aircraft AI, but even for something simpler, if it's mission critical, you can't just use an LLM and be like, it'll be good enough. But there are plenty of jobs in business that require that level of fidelity. And I think those are the places I would go after AI myself first.
Yeah. I think as the accuracy comes up, and this gets to by the way, instant segue to our main topic, which is AI skepticism. I think this is just a natural segue. And I was going to say we originally thought self-driving cars, for example, were a terrible idea. Everyone knew they were a good idea, but also no one's going to get in the self-driving car that like the 1.0 of self-driving cars. And I think now you're seeing with the Waymos and so on in the world that self-driving, when you look at their numbers in the average sort of circumstance, like, and you remove things like inclement weather and those sorts of things that they're still working on, these things are driving in sometimes better, safer than human drivers, right? And so I think we're going to start seeing cases, and there are already workflows and cases where the number of mistakes the AI makes is indiscernible from the number of mistakes a educated but maybe not senior human would make. And as they ratchet that up, the theory is that sure, the AI can make mistakes, but it's making mistakes at the same level as your surgeon is making mistakes. And 10, 15, 16, 20 hours into that surgeon's work shift, which would you rather have? The AI that's still running at the capacity that he had when he first walked in, or the human that's running at the ridiculous 16-hour schedule capacity that they run those people at now? Right.
There are a lot of things to dig in here. First of all, neither of those are just ChatGPT nakedly running and doing these things. These are systems that were built through a ton of QA and validation, and it's not just one large language model powering it. I think that's the biggest difference. And honestly, I think even once you test and verify that these systems are doing better than humans, there's still a big psychological barrier to overcome. And we are starting to overcome it because these companies like Waymo and so forth actually seem to be successful, and they're rolling out, even though there have been fatalities where AI have hit and killed people. And
and it just feels so much worse than if a human went to hit their radio and hit you versus the AI, which sometimes the AI is making like a utilitarian decision about, okay, what's the best outcome of this particular crash that I know I'm going to be in? It's just, but when you look at the statistics of driving, like, it's one of the most dangerous things any of us engage in on a regular basis. And if these things are safer, but emotionally they don't feel safer, what does adoption look like? And I think that's one of those things that you and I might just be. We might be the old fuddy-duddies who are like, I don't want AI flying my plane.
I don't think it's necessarily an age thing. Because in a way, like, if I have to drive during rush hour and I see those people who are just like weaving in between, like, I already feel
the people who think they're really good drivers, but they're like an inch away. It's like
I'm already at the closest safe following distance, and someone manages to squeeze in between me just so they can then get over to the right lane and pass one more car. And then 20 minutes later, we get off the same exit together, and they're not any further ahead. All that risk taking had at most a 10, 15-second advantage to them. And I'm thinking, how is 15 seconds worth the risk? It's not a sane decision, in my opinion.
Right.
If we were all in AI cars,
that problem goes away.
Presumably there'll be less of that. Although I wonder.
I think as you have people who've spent more of their lives with AI making more critical decisions for them, there might be less hesitancy, because I think we're seeing that with pretty much all technology, right? There's just less hesitancy because people are more familiar with it. And as we get more familiar with it too, right? I have yet to be in a self-driving car other than being in a Tesla when it automatically backed out, which is on its own really cool. But I think
Wait, I backed into you?
No, backed out of a parking spot. It's just automatically removed itself from the parking spot so that the driver doesn't have to constantly check, because it's got more sensors than you have eyeballs. So it's actually going to do a better job at that than you are.
My car has radar on the back, and my driveway is right on an alley. And so you cannot see if anyone's coming down the alley from the driver's side, but the radar can. And so if I hit it, put it in reverse, it'll go beep, and it's great. It even shows you it's coming from the left. And sure enough, a second later, here comes someone driving way too fast down my alley.
So I think this is also back to AI rather than traffic issues.
Yeah.
I think this is also a thing about what kind of tools are we giving AI? And again, AI is just one tool in the toolbox. So you might have, for instance, in the plane flying example, which I'm not advocating we have LLMs fly a plane ever. AI maybe, but LLMs are just one piece of AI, right? But you could have a tool is everything ready to go? And the is everything ready to go tool might be handwritten by an Andy to double check that all the systems are reporting go with zero interpretation by an LLM. And I think that's when you get into things like model context protocol, and you get into things like retrieval augmented generation and fine tuning, where you're basically, the AI is doing what it's good at, which is synthesizing and aggregating and making the interface human and potentially making some decisions. But that decision-making process is being augmented by more traditional software systems.
Oh, exactly. So a couple examples come to mind that I've been thinking about. One is maybe you wanted to use AI to find like excerpts from some document that you could use for marketing purposes. Typically, we just say, hey, give me some quotes, and it literally just spits out, this at the bottom. The problem is when you have a large language model quote some piece of material that was further up in context, it can make a mistake, especially if there's really common, I'm guessing, like colloquialisms, or if it's said in an unusual way and typically it would be said a different way, it might just not get it right. You could instead say, tell me what line of the document, which first or sentence or word of that paragraph.
Right.
And then you could use a traditional tool that's not going to make a mistake to do a text excerpt and get that out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this gets to like using the tools and designing the tool chain as you're approaching these tasks. When I go to automate a first workflow, the first thing I do is make sure my prompt is well formed. And I take a shot at it, right? Like, how good is this going to get the result? And I think 80% of the use cases, a well formatted prompt gets me close enough to what I need that I don't need to go any further. And I think that's the first case, right? Which is, let's get that 80%, the easy stuff off our plates. But then the 20% is, okay, it's giving me something that's maybe 50%, 60% of the way there, but I need to either go back or tune the prompt, or I need to move what the decision making that the LLM is trying to do and the reasoning somewhere else in the decision chain. Like, one of the things that I use it for regularly is helping me synthesize stuff from transcripts, meeting transcripts, podcast transcripts, and so on. And like, it's great if I just want, what did we talk about? What was the sentiment? How could I have done this better? Did I miss anything? Those sorts of things. It's really good at that. But when I'm like, okay, give me 10 specific clips that I could then repurpose, right? It'll give me 9, or it'll give me 5 and make one up. And so that's where you're like, you have to ask, am I asking it for too much because the context is too big? Do I need to give it smaller transcripts? Do I move the reasoning further down, maybe copy paste some paragraphs and put that in? And so typically I will still work with the prompt and try to get it close. But that's also why human in the loop is such an important thing. Is if I get it 80% of the way there, I can take the other 20%. Now I have to do 80% less work. That's like a win for me. But if I'm also like a business owner who isn't cutting people on an operating table open, like, you can't, 80% of the way there is not good enough for kidney surgery. It's perfectly fine for marketing.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think that's the other case where you see these legitimate skepticism, I think, come in.
Yeah. I'm working on a project right now where we're trying to fuse a bunch of different data sources to come up with one unified data set that contains all of the records across these different sources. Most of them have the same records in there. It's just covering our bases, that there might be some obscure, these are places of interest. There might be some obscure places that only one of the databases knows about and the others don't. And so that's the reason we're bringing in multiple and reconciling them in this way. But in this case, if on any one of those, like some of them are straightforward import that are not AI based, but some of them are like the data is so strangely formatted that we're using AI to normalize it. If on that case, some of the records get dropped, it's probably not a deal breaker because, like I said, we're merging it in. So we could boost the quality of the final result a little bit by getting that from, say, 80% to 100%, but it isn't going to be a deal breaker because statistically, it's going to be a pretty small impact on the overall data set. And we don't know exactly how OpenAI's reasoning models work.
We don't have access to the instructions they're feeding it, right?
What's really interesting is you can watch it think, because there's a mode where it'll give you updates as it goes. And on one of these data sets, I saw it basically say, gosh, there's a lot of records here. It's probably too many for me to keep track of. So I'll just give the first 50. It literally said that. Yeah. Even though my intent is, no, hey, wait, I want them all. I need them all.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to go back and play with that to be like, all right, how do I work with this prompt? Can you tell me if there's too many? And then we'll break it down by some other axis or dimension. I'll be like, oh, I only want the ones that start with the letter A through M. Right. And then maybe,
and this is
M
why
Z.
Like the complex workflows require someone like you to put together, whereas someone maybe with less experience might waste too much time trying to prompt it, not understanding that the context window is literally just not going to get there. I think we will see the AIs improve on those kinds of long workflows, but I think this gets to, this is a tool in a whole tool chain where you're solving this problem. I think the other thing you can do is, assuming that it's an ecosystem of solutions and not like software is, rather than we're just going to do the LLM and then the magic's going to happen. The input goes in and the magic happens. You're like, okay, we're going to do the LLM. Then we're going to double check. Maybe have a different LLM check this one's work. And maybe we're going to have a non-LLM count the number of records that went in and the number of records went out. And if they don't match, we're going to be like, okay, something's fishy here. Maybe a human needs to get involved. And so I think these are the things where the design of the workflow automation solution is so much greater than the LLM. But the LLM has given us this amazing tool to interpret like almost random data in synthesize it in unique and interesting ways.
I feel like I am on both sides of this kind of skepticism issue.
Yeah.
Yes, you and I talk about, if you have this problem, here's what you can do to augment it, to ameliorate it. And but I almost feel like we're in the Frost poem about a path in the woods, right? And which way are we gonna go? And I think what's happening is there's a lot of excitement, particularly at executive and leadership level, for the power of what these tools could do to make a business more profitable, efficient, so forth. But on the employee level, I think there's a lot of natural skepticism that happens almost instantaneously because they aren't taught how to use them. And they try to take their specific problem domain and throw it on just vanilla ChatGPT, and it's not going to do a great job. And
then you add to that the fear of, am I training my replacement?
Am I training my replacement? And so you rapidly have this divergence where within one corporation, the two sectors of the employees versus leadership, they see completely differently. And I think both sides need to come together, because there will be genuine times where you do have employees that actually do the work and figure out what it takes to get good results and are finding that for their particular job, it's not saving time. By the time you have to do human in the loop to double check it, each problem is just enough different. There might be good reasons where, AI is not going to win us here. And I think leadership needs to listen and be like, for now, okay, we're not going to upset.
I think that for now is useful, because I remember polling you guys even late last year or late 24 on the AI automation for coding and whether it was helping you. And I think the consistent feedback I had was maybe, right? And now I just did that poll a few weeks back, and I'm consistently hearing from you all that it's helping significantly. And I think, like you said, the coders are living in the future.
We are, because all those things we talk about, how you make these systems more effective, we already have, because the work we do already had so much validation built into it. So those automated ways to verify that the work we're doing is correct, coding is just miles ahead of any other kind of office work.
It's already engineering, but I think it's also an example of an extremely complex thing that AI is starting to get more. So I think but also these are going to be lumping.
I need to start making a list of the kinds of mistakes AI makes still, even with all the helpful compilers and linters and style guides that can be there to reinforce
automated testing, and
it's still making mistakes. But it's sometimes like higher level conceptual mistakes. Just imagine you're at a restaurant, and you know how they have A1 egg roll, A2 cheese wonton.
We're at Chinese restaurant.
Okay. You could order just by saying I want A1, or you could order by saying I want the egg roll. You don't have to say both. But here's a mistake some coding that it just wrote for me did. It sent two pieces of information in the request, and it was duplicating information. And so that doesn't seem like a terrible bug on the surface. It's not like it crashes or whatever. But that's just like sand in the gears, because now
but then your AI shopper, your DoorDash comes and you get two egg rolls.
Also, what happens when those two things don't match? Then which one is actually fulfilled? And that means you can make a request for A1, but then say, actually, I want a new car on the second description. And maybe the billing part of your backend uses the first code, but the delivery part uses the second one. And now you're selling cars for the price of an egg roll. You don't want to do things like that in your software. And the
In
AI
this
right now is
theoretical,
like,
I have egg rolls and cars
and
in
in one
my
shop. But the thing is, that's, as a coder, that's the kind of thing I have to pay attention to, that things are done correctly. And AI is, it at the end of the day, it is just filling in the blank with whatever looks like it goes there.
Yeah, it's
And
vibing,
so
right?
it is yeah, it's got some interesting vibes.
Yeah. So I think the summary is you should try it for these workflows, depending on how mission critical those workflows are. And I think the human in the loop, automated validation, treating these things as they're not as engineering problems where you have to iterate on the prompting, you have to iterate on the tool chain, you might have to do things differently. Well, making the assumption it's not going to solve every problem for you, right?
Because here's another thing. AIs don't learn like we do. If you had an intern come and do a terrible job in their first assignment and you explain to them, this is terrible, I need you to do this and this, probably tomorrow, they're not going to make those same mistakes. AI will absolutely make those same mistakes again, unless you
it's
take
still a
that
computer
feedback.
From that perspective.
You have to close the loop. You have to go all the way back to the original prompting or context information that's kicked it off.
And this is something that I do consistently. Is I have a GPT or a prompt generating GPT, and I will give it the prompt, the output, the input, and I will say, why did I get the wrong output here? I was looking for this. You gave me this. Why? And it will actually 95% of the time,
it'll make up a plausible answer.
It will nail why it happened, and it will generate a new prompt, and that new prompt will almost always work and solve that problem. It's really interesting. It knows a lot of about how to prompt itself, but there's these secret weapons that we have to basically figure out how to make things. But if you assume that the first thing's correct, you can just move on. Or I think a lot of the negativity that I see out there around AI is because there's a combination of this fear, but also the people give it the first try and they don't realize that they need to go back and do a better job prompting. It's a skill that you have to build. It's engineering, and it's a lot easier than our normal engineering. And we've known forever, the computer is a dumb rock. If we tell it to do something wrong, it's going to happily continue to do that thing wrong over and over and over again. Prompting is just a more human interface to the computer doing what you tell it to do. And a lot of the cases when I have errors in prompting, it's because I'm being ambiguous, and it's the ambiguity of the language that I'm using, which computer programming doesn't necessarily have that issue because it's so pedantic and so detail oriented. And so now you have to explain to it, like, I use the word race, but race is a homonym that can mean 5 different things. And in this context, you grabbed the wrong one. So maybe I just need to change that word.
So there's parallels with both regular office work and coding that come to mind. So like your attitude in the prompt is going to change the output. If you use like brusque, mean language, like you're yelling at it, versus pleading versus very straightforward, instructive, that'll have subtle impacts on the output. In fact, it's even been shown that like in coding, we have these things called variables, and they're just like for a developer's own information, naming little bits of memory in the computer so that when you store off something, you can actually recall that and know, what did I put it? Because at the end of the day, computers are all numbers, right? But you don't know that this particular place in memory has a person's name, so you put a name on what's called a variable, and you say that's the person's name. But that's up to the developer what they call that. And just turns out what you call your variables impacts how well they can generate new code, because these things are influenced by everything around them, whether you want them to or not. So it's this strange thing where it's a computer, which should be so analytical, but now it's basically so moody. It's
more like a person from that sense. I think similar, an intern is going to have a similar response to you yelling at them versus being nice to them.
I tell you what, I became a computer programmer because I liked that I could just sit here and do my thing and not have to feel about how my computer felt about it.
Yeah, and now it's like the people who say please and thank you. So like you did make a comment earlier about adoption and employees pushing back and saying this isn't useful for me. And I think there's 2 interesting things there that when I do workshops with executive teams, one of the couple of the things that I point out for stage 0 of adoption before you start rolling this tool out. Number 1, You absolutely have to educate the people you want to use the tool on how to use the tool. And if you don't know, you need to educate yourself too. Like, you can't just assume that Andy is going to be an amazing person at this thing.
Can I add to that? Because something I struggled with was somehow getting the willingness to be educated on it. Because when you feel threatened by a thing, the last thing you want to do is become an expert on how to use that thing so it can threaten you better.
Right.
And so you have to realize, no, there is a role for me, but like the role is changing, and this is now
that gets to step 2, which I always advise people: make sure you have a clearly articulated ethical position and a policy on where AI should be used, both from an ethics perspective, how you're going to use it for your company, but also from just a realism perspective. Here's where we shouldn't use it yet. And by articulating, I'm not here to replace you, but I will replace you if you don't use this tool.
I suppose you could bring it. That's a pretty big hammer. Right? You probably don't need to say that.
Don't
Everyone's
say
probably
that.
Already
but
thinking that.
5, 6, 7 months in, if you have a sales team where 4 or 5 of the salespeople are doing 40, 50, 60% more work, now the person who isn't using AI is underperforming. And I think one of the things I've learned in leadership is, if someone is surprised when I have that performance conversation with them, I've done it wrong. I need to message really early saying, okay, I might not fire you for not using this tool, but I'm going to expect you to get consistently equivalent results to the other people on your team. So if you don't want to use this tool and you don't want to learn this tool, I really think that might be the wrong decision for you as your boss. And this is not because people are going to want more things out of their employees, because productivity does go up when you use AI. And I think it's the system we've designed that we live in. Like, we don't owe people jobs. They need to be performing members of the team, and they need to be. So I think the other piece of that is the education component, because it is deeply lacking compassion and empathy to basically just turn to someone and say, hey, you've got a whole new way of doing your job. And I expect in 2 weeks, you're going to be 50% better. And if you're not, I'm going to yell at you and bye. I'm going to go golf now. Remember when you first became an engineering manager, and there were like all these challenges, and I was working with you, and you're a partner here. And we came to the conclusion, with the help of a mentor of mine, you had a career change. You had moved from individual contributor, coder, to manager. And I had not given you the tools to become a good manager. You had to muddle through that yourself. And you got there, but it was really an aha moment for me as a leader. It's, if I'm going to give you a new mandate, I need to pair it with the resources to do an amazing job. And then I let you do the thing that you're going to do, but I need to create safety and skills.
That's a great point. I love that call out. Bringing AI in, though, doesn't necessarily mean it's a career change for everyone, but it is a big transition. But one of the things I've experienced as a coder, if we go with this living in the future thing, is that so much of the drudge work, like I used to get, carpal tunnel, because you literally had to type all the keystrokes in the code. Yeah. And while you're sitting there typing, you knew what you needed for 30 seconds, but I have to get it out. And then you can move on to the next thing. But AI is much like type ahead often. You start something, it knows the rest of the line, because it turns out these languages are only as expressive as the words we put together, and oftentimes it's obvious. And so it completes it. Or even if I just do a prompt and it generates several files for me, now I'm just looking high level, I'm reviewing it. I'm thinking about the architecture, the bigger scope problems, the little drudge things like having to wait until my fingers could literally push all the buttons. I'm freed from that now. So in some ways, it is an exciting time that, I'm being empowered. I get to do the creative parts of my job, the architecture, the big designs. I get to do those more and more often. And rather than being stuck down in the minutia, which sometimes is fun. Like, humans are very flexible. It can be fun, just like stamping envelopes.
Especially engineers, like very detail-oriented people by nature. But when I got out of coding 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, however long ago it was now, one of the things that, reflecting back, that I didn't really realize at the time is, it's extremely frustrating. It's a frustrating profession, because 9 times out of 10, the thing isn't running. It's your fault, and it's a semicolon or a parentheses or an off by one error. Like, it's one of the very common mistakes that you have made throughout your entire career. it's just another iteration of that. It's rarely something new. It's rarely something that you couldn't have caught if you thought about it differently. And that it's just like over and over again. And so one of the things, there's a thinker in AI and software engineer named Nate. That's his handle. I don't actually know his last name, unfortunately. But he was saying, I was watching his comments on 5.2 over the weekend, and one of the things that he said, which I agree with, is the number one skill that we need to develop going into the agentic age of AI, which is coming, is delegation. So managers are actually, I think, more predisposed towards this than individual contributors.
Yeah.
Because now you can train, imagine you're already there, coding is already there, where you can spin up 2, 3, 4 things that it's working on, and you can walk away and come back and it's got some code for you. A lot of the agentic stuff is going to move that direction for more knowledge-based jobs. Go make me a presentation, go do some research, go do this. And now your day might be waking up, sitting down at your desk, maybe even talking at your phone or at your desk and saying, okay, I need to do a presentation on Wednesday. You need to respond to Robert. I'm doing a SWOT. Can you do a SWOT analysis? And then your agents go out and do that, and you go make your coffee and get back. And now you've got to look at it with the critique that we all as managers had to develop. Is this quality work? Does it need another iteration? Is this a training moment for my employee? Is this a training moment for the AI?
Yeah.
Was this person the wrong person to give this task? Which LLMs are going to be more wrong to start.
Yeah, that's part of the thing I didn't ever know I'd have to learn, and I resisted, but I am actually having to learn the personalities of the different models, because some of them are better suited for other things. Not that it makes any sense that they are, but you have to check. And actually, Claude does this really well. OpenAI does that.
And these things don't replace employees in that sense, but it's amazing how many of the lessons we had to learn as a manager apply to using AI. Things like, this person might not be the right person for this job, or I need to provide more training to this person so they can do a better job, or all of these sort of questions. And so I think that skill that you've developed when you first take over as a manager, one of the things that, like, I had this, you had this, every manager I've ever talked to had this, which is, I got promoted to where I am because I was good at what the role I'm managing is doing. And now I know I could do a better job, at least at the start, than this employee that I have doing the work. Like, I could come in and I could write that marketing copy exactly the way I want it. I could write that code exactly how I want it to come out. And you have to step back and say, yeah, but then I would have to do it. And can be really hard to let go of that vine and just let the team produce 90% quality work, or work and then realize a year later they produce just as good work as you, and it's your bias going, my work was better.
With human beings, that should be a good feeling at some point, that you've enabled these people to succeed. With AI, it's a little bit, you're not like, yay you. But also, AI. Given that AI requires still this human in the loop, I think there's still that fear. So you have to build processes around it, so you're not left like hanging. I asked it to do this thing, I don't know if it did it right.
But like the feeling of it just absolutely nailing something that would have taken you hours in minutes, the first few times that happens, it's you can see a future where you're, like you said earlier, you're not bound to the you're not tied to the rack, to the wheel that's spinning. You're able to step back and orchestrate more, accomplish more, both as an employee, but also just as a human. And maybe that gives us space to be more human. That is my optimistic view of AI. I think there are plenty of big Fortune 50 business owners who are going to be beholden to their quarterly results and do terrible things with it. But I think one of the benefits of being a small and mid-sized business owner is I can see a world where we have a 4-day work week. And when you come into the job on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every person on my team is doing creative work that fulfills them 50, 60, 70% of the time. And the machines are doing the grunt work. And that's what excites me about AI. And I think we haven't really done ourselves as business owners a great service by really harping on the AI employee replacement. We at Modern Logic say it doesn't replace employees, but saying that's not a legitimate concern is also absurd, because it really is a legitimate. Productivity goes up, employment necessarily goes down, because you can accomplish the same with less people. And on the other end of that, there's more value generation. And historically, what happens is that value generation creates new jobs, but it does take time. It does displace
disruption
people.
is always going to be challenging.
Right.
And this is a big disruption.
But I think if you want to stay ahead of the disruption, ignoring the tool is a really bad idea, right?
Yeah, never a good idea to bury your head in the sand.
Yeah.
Look at the time, I think, has flown by. We probably should wrap this up.
Oh, shocking. We ran another 50-minute podcast, but it's consistently Andy and I are like, we really want to aim for 30 minutes. And then
I remember
we get
looking at the clock at 11 minutes thinking, are we going to have enough to talk about today?
So if you made it to this point, if you think this is too long or just the right note, drop us a note, because we're curious. Like, how many people make it? We know how many people are listening, but do people make it to this point?
Make it to the
do
end?
We need to make it shorter?
Yeah.
Do people make it all this way through and
we've
just
been debating.
The whole
do
thing?
we need to? Yeah. We can
finally a few weeks ago, we were just like, maybe this is just who we are.
This is just who we are. All right.
This is just who we are.
Okay. Thanks for joining us. Follow us on our other platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. AI for Your Business is written by me, Andrew Rahn, and Dustin Bruzenak. It's produced and edited by Ryan Peterson, with additional contributions by Dylan Bruzenak, Anna Spitz, and Beth Davis. Our AI mascot was created by the artist Becca Rahn. Our theme music is Elastic Vibe by Ziv Moran. Do you have any questions or suggestions we can discuss? Please get in touch with us. You can find us at modernlogic.io/podcast. AI for Your Business is a production of Modern Logic. If you like the show, please remember to share, rate, and review. It really does make a difference to us.